Morning.
Morning.
Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
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 Right, welcome. We've got the waiting room is clearing out. People are moving in, so good to see you all.
Good to see you.
Thanks for including us.
Absolutely. Well, let's see, I think we'll go ahead and get started. I will ask, let's see here, of course my Zoom screen has disappeared. Welcome to the Vermont Arts Council, Vermont Creative Network Legislative Roundup. I am thrilled to be with you all virtually this morning. And I will ask
Cleaning up. So if you want to wash the dishes, if you want whatever jobs you want to do.
can mute yourself to avoid background noise. Get started. That would be helpful. Can you all, everybody can hear now? Great. Thanks for being here. My name's Amy Cunningham. I'm the Deputy Director of the Vermont Arts Council. Karen Middleman, our Executive Director, was on the agenda to welcome us this morning, but an unexpected issue has kept her away, so she sends her regrets. Some accessibility logistics. This event is being live captioned by White Coat Captioning. To view the captions during the event, click on the closed caption button on the bottom of your Zoom screen, and then click on the show on the bottom of your Zoom screen option to view the captions on your screen. You may also view a full page text of the captions by clicking on the link that my colleague Deirdre will be posting in the chat. And there it is. So that's another option for viewing the captions. This event, as you saw when you joined in, this event is being recorded, and we will be sharing a link to the recording after the event. And I know we're all Zoom experts at this point, but just ask that you keep yourself muted unless you're speaking, just to limit the background noise. And feel free to use that chat function at the bottom of the screen to say hi, to let us know if you're running into any technical challenges, and to pose any questions for the group. We have time at the end of this session for question and answers. I'd like to begin with a land acknowledgement. Vermont is in the traditional unsurrendered territory of the Abenaki people, one of 5 Wabanaki nations who've had a continuous presence here since time immemorial. The Vermont Arts Council learned from Abenaki elders that in Abenaki, Waban is the white flickering light in the sky, and Aki is the word for land. So the Wabanaki are the people of the Dawnland. We acknowledge their ancestors, their history, and their continuing creative presence today. Thank you. We are here today to recap a momentous legislative session shaped by unprecedented federal funding and opportunities for transformative investments in the state, and tempered by the stark realities of economic uncertainty, massive affordability, environmental, and social inequality challenges facing the state. This year also marked an important new chapter for Vermont's creative economy, building on years of research, case making, planning, and coalition building, and coming off the release of the Create VT Action Plan in 2021, where we asserted our vision for the state, that creativity is essential to the cultural and economic vitality of Vermont, that arts, culture, and creativity are essential Vermont infrastructure, that Vermont communities thrive through creative expression and enterprise, and that creative enterprises succeed in a diverse, equitable, connected, and collaborative environment. One of our highest priorities coming out of that Create VT Action Plan was empowering advocates and building an advocacy strategy for the state's creative economy. And so the Vermont Creative Network in this last year jumped enthusiastically into the advocacy realm. This has been a tremendous collective effort. It's the energy of individual creatives, business owners, cultural groups, nonprofit leaders, regional planners and economic development folks, and legislators from all corners of the state. Thank you. Many of you are here today. Many of you participated in last fall's advocacy sessions, provided input and ideas, and spoke out to leaders and policymakers to share your stories of the challenges of the pandemic, and all of the ways that you see the creative sector as crucial to Vermont's identity and future. Want to give special thanks to the Vermont Creative Network steering team members, including our 6 zone agents representing 6 regions across the state and many key advocacy partners. Specific shout out to the Vermont Humanities Council, Christopher Kaufman Ilstrup. They've been invaluable collaborative partners in supporting the Vermont Creative Network and the creative sector. To Jody Freed, wearing one of his many hats as chair of the Vermont Creative Network, and Patty Comline and the government relations team at DRM, who helped us understand and navigate the session. It's been tremendous. So thanks to our champions in the legislature and the efforts of the many local advocates and statewide partners, the outcomes of this session include unprecedented opportunities for creative sector support, including $9 million of American Rescue Plan Act funds to the Vermont Arts Council for grants to creative sector entities that have sustained economic harm due to the pandemic. So we'll talk a little bit about that program later. But while we take time to celebrate and express gratitude, I also want to acknowledge and lift up that it's been an enormously challenging period for so many. And from recent conversations I've had, the Performing Arts Festival, who recently faced enormous additional costs and possible cancellations from COVID outbreaks, despite many precautions. The theater, whose ticket sales continue to lag due to audience hesitancy, and artists who are still digging out from 2 years of lost tourist season sales. We know that these challenges continue. The programs we'll be talking about today are aimed at shoring up businesses and nonprofits and communities so that they can regain their footing and thrive. Because we know a healthy creative sector drives economic growth and community vitality, bolsters Vermont's reputation as a place for innovation and imagination, and builds thriving communities. So I'm delighted to be joined by 2 amazing creative sector champions, Senator Allison Clarkson and Representative Stephanie Jerome, who are true creative sector advocates, both having served as lead sponsors of the key creative sector investment bills introduced in their respective chambers. We are really grateful for your time and insights today. And I think I'm turning it over to both of you to take it away.
We're a team.
Yes.
Good morning, everybody. It's great to have you. I'm Allison Clarkson. I'm senator from Windsor District, and I'm the majority leader in the Senate, and I serve as vice chair of Senate Economic Development, Housing, and General Affairs, and on government operations. Stephanie?
Hi, I'm Stephanie Jerome, and I'm the representative from Brandon, Pittsburgh, and Sudbury, and I serve on the Commerce and Economic Development Committee and have been the ranking member. And both Alice and I were lead sponsors for the Creative Futures Bill in our respective bodies. So, Allison, you want me to start saying?
Why don't you start, because you made the most progress on that specific bill, because in the Senate there was resistance to favoring any one hardest hit sector. Okay. So the House was, but I have to just say before I turn it over to you, I have never had so many people enthusiastically want to sign on to a bill than our bills. So it is a credit to all of you in the field who are creating incredible things in our communities that people really wanted to engage with this bill and support it. So,
sure. So thanks again for inviting us to be with you today. And so clearly the creative sector has proven to be an incredibly important part of Vermont's economy. And the funds in S11 will help the broad, as we know, the broad range of creative economy businesses and nonprofits in the state, and have these businesses and nonprofits return to a sound footing and all the financial and recover from all the financial harms caused by COVID-19. S11 and H624 have proven that the creative economy is essential to Vermont's future economic vitality. So let me just start by talking a little bit about H624 and its enthusiastic support. And acknowledge Karen Middleman's work in spearheading this effort. It is really historic and monumental. First, again, in the House, I had 25, I was a lead sponsor, but 25 House members signed on. And I had sort of I set a deadline for those folks to sign on. And many, many more people had missed the deadline and really wanted to be part of on that bill. So during the development of this bill, we heard from the wide variety of creative economy businesses and nonprofits and performing arts venues, and the list, the umbrella is wide. But in April, the bill passed unanimously in the House, and that means all Democrats, all Republicans, all independents, all progressives voted to support the bill. It was a monumental achievement and proved again that what we know, but it proved that there's widespread support and belief in the importance of the creative economy throughout Vermont, in all corners of the state, in all 14 counties, and within all political parties. H624 was a larger bill. We had approved $17.5 million for grants and incentives and help for the creative economy. But within that, there was $10 million of creative economy grants to help the nonprofit sector, the creative economy sector. And legislators love this bill and were obviously enthusiastic about it. So this is the piece that the House had. Do you want to say anything more about how it progressed in the Senate then, Allison, if you want to talk
I
more
will
about that?
once you're done, because that's
Okay.
once you send it to us, I'll pick up.
Okay, fine. So I guess you can take it over now. I just want to talk about, I was going to talk a bit about the conference committee. So why don't you talk about how it happened, what happened in the Senate?
Sure, and I'll talk about the bigger pieces too.
Sure.
So the House passed this bill. It came to the Senate. It had been introduced in the Senate, obviously, and I had a chair, and my committee, I think, generally felt that we had many hardest hit sectors, and we had identified them. We called them out: the lodging industry, the restaurant industry, and the creative sector was certainly one of them. As special events, there were lots. My committee of 5 felt uncomfortable just highlighting one. But in the end, and we can chat about this in the conference committee, we were able to actually keep $9 million solely for the creative sector, which is thrilling. However, there are 68 other $1 million worth of help, and you're going to hear from Cassie, and so we have 19 million that you're also be able to access, which are still for the hardest hit sectors who didn't necessarily fit into the right hole, who was a square peg trying to fit into a round hole. We have a lot of creative sector businesses where they didn't quite fit for the right kind of help. So that money is going to be available to you as well, in addition to the $9 million. And on top of that, we have $40 million in what was our capital investment program, which really initially, and I still think we think of it as a transformational investment grant, but that's now called the Community Recovery and Revitalization Program. That also, for the right creative sector businesses and nonprofits and municipal partnerships, may be a great program for you to be applying for, particularly for those of you with arts programs that are tied into municipal into a municipal structure, sort of like Pentangle. I live in Woodstock, and Pentangle's very much engaged with our town hall and our municipal values and our municipality. So there are $68 million, quite honestly, totally, that are accessible to the creative sector in some capacity, and 9 million specifically for hardcore recovery needs. So do you want to speak, Stephanie, about the conference committee?
Sure. Well, so in a little background on how the House and the Senate was working on economic development. So the Senate was working on economic development. We decided to divvy up this giant workforce economic development focus. And in the beginning of the legislative session, the governor said this was a focus. Our House and Senate leadership said
thought it was a focus.
Workforce and economic development and is a huge focus. And so we all knew that we were on the same page with that. So it was going to be a huge amount of effort and a huge amount of work. So the House and the Senate divvied up that work. So In the end of the legislative session, we found a vehicle so that we could combine both of all the work that we had done. And that was S11.
Which is now Act 183.
183.
So if you look it up on the web, you can find it very easily under bills passed. You can put in S11 or Act 183.
So both Senator Clarkson and I were named to the conference committee during the last days of the legislative session, very last days of the legislative session. We came together and found a way to combine both of our efforts into one bill, and then folded as much as we could of H624 into S11. And it's a huge bill. The document is over 100 pages. It addresses the negative economic impacts of COVID-19 on Vermont's economy, its employers, its workers, its families, and establishes opportunities for Vermont's economy to grow.
So
Bill creates. Go ahead.
no, I was just going to say half of it is workforce development opportunities, which may also have creative sector applications, and half of it is economic development incentives, the 68 million for economic development. So it is a big bill that we encourage you all to look through. I mean, and use, because it is there for you. It is there for you to recover and flourish, and as Amy said, thrive. And we want to be moving forward together, because really, as we found out in the early 2000s, the reason people love living here and move here is the quality of life, and you are such an essential cornerstone to the quality of our lives.
So this bill, as Senator Clarkson said, it has this wide workforce development component and creates programs for workforce participation in healthcare, mental health, and trades. It also includes scholarships and loan repayments, education, upskilling, and internships programs. And then the bill includes appropriations for new and existing economic development programs, some of which Allison's touched on, and it aims at supporting businesses and nonprofits and municipalities, reimbursing businesses for COVID-related sick leave, expanding tax credits, and most importantly for this forum, assisting the arts and culture sector. And S11 provides an unprecedented, and I believe this to be true, an unprecedented amount of support for the creative sector. It will allow us to help hundreds of organizations and businesses that are struggling. We had mentioned that $9 million of ARPA funds directly appropriated to the Vermont Arts Council to cover for creative economy grants to cover monthly operating expenses for businesses and nonprofits that have sustained the losses during the pandemic. This $19 million in the short-term forgivable loans, which Cassie Polimus was discussing on that the Vermont Economic Development Authority will be administering, and then this $40 million in community revitalization and recovery grants for nonprofits and for-profit businesses. And in that piece, that $40 million is very, very similar to the $10 million that was allocated last session. And in June, we found out that 4 arts organizations received a combined $3 million from that. The Paramount Theater, the Northern Stage, Burlington City Arts, as well as the Retreat Farm. And I believe there's gonna be another $7 million in grants being announced soon. That hasn't been announced yet, Allison, has it? No, yeah. And then this additional $40 million, which is an unbelievable amount of money to help these sort of pivotal organizations and infrastructure throughout the state. And that will be sometime later this summer, I'm hoping will be announced as far as the administration process.
The guidelines, and Cassie can update you on her guidelines because they're moving ahead fairly fast. We're hoping that the VITA forgivable loan will be some function very much like grants, but they're really for the, there's going to be a lot of individual attention, which Cassie will address, and really help those businesses that are kind of, that are unusual. Let's put it that way. Unusual and may have been a challenge for others, but the wonderful thing about the Vermont Economic Development Authority is that they provide a lot of individual attention and can really shepherd a business through a challenging process and make it a lot simpler and easier and understandable. So I think that's taken more than our 5 minutes, Amy. We apologize, but that I hope sets up Cassie to chat about what she's doing. I understand from the Commissioner of Economic Development that they're hoping to have their guidelines for the $40 million ready by the early fall, and have applications open sometime in the early fall.
So one last thing I wanted to mention is that this bill also had a very small piece in it to establish a film and media task force, which I have been asked to be the House member on that committee. Allison, perhaps you're that Senate committee.
No, I'm not. I was married to the beginning of the first Vermont Film Commission. So Randy Brock is going to be the member.
Okay, and it's going to look at the history, what has happened in the past, and then all the different pieces on whether this is what can be done to revitalize the industry and what can be done to revigorate the film industry in Vermont, and sort of the history of what happened in the past, and and whether or not we should move forward with something like that. So
whether
that is
or not
a very small piece of this larger bill.
Nope, but a good one. Anyway, Amy, to you and to Cassie, thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, thank you both so much. This is like Schoolhouse Rocks. It's a Gen X reference to how bills get made, and we know that it's an enormously complicated process, and especially this session with all of these transformative investments. So thank you for helping us understand it, and more importantly, thanks for everything you did, not just for the creative sector, but for issues that affect all Vermonters this session. So with that, I'm going to spend a few minutes talking through the Creative Futures Grant Program, and then a brief mention of some of those programs that Stephanie and Allison alluded to. And then I'm going to turn it over to Cassie Polimus, the CEO of VITA, to talk about the Forgivable Loan Program. So I am going to attempt to share screen here today. Let's see. Can I see a thumbs up that you all are seeing my screen? Awesome. Thank you. So the $9 million allocation for creative economy grants that's been allocated to the Vermont Arts Council, we called it the 9 million for a couple weeks and realized we should actually give it a name. So it's the Creative Futures Grant Program. My disclaimer, and I know Cassie is going to have a similar disclaimer, is that we are all scrambling to put our programs together and get all of the pieces together, and we are all awaiting different levels of final approval from the state in different capacities. And so what I'm going to present to you today is our program plan, and I just offer this disclaimer that pending final approval from the Agency of Administration, some of the details of this program may change. This is the text directly from Act 183 S11, this massive bill for workforce development and economic development that Allison and Stephanie were just summarizing. So the amount of $9 million appropriated to the Vermont Arts Council to provide grants for monthly operating costs. I emboldened some of the key pieces here, to creative economy businesses and nonprofits who've sustained substantial losses due to the pandemic. So that's the foundation from which we are building this grant program. Eligibility, the text from the legislation: creative economy businesses and nonprofits that have sustained substantial losses due to the pandemic. So that is for-profit and nonprofit creative entities, including sole proprietorships. Those of you who are familiar with the Vermont Arts Council know that we've got a long history of grants to individual artists and to nonprofits. This is a brand new opportunity for us, and I think this is a great new chapter in terms of support for the creative sector. This is open for for-profit creative businesses as well, and including sole proprietorships. And I want to highlight that especially because, frankly, we need your help in getting the word out. You know, we have worked for a long time with cultural nonprofits and individual artists, but we're casting a wider net here, and we want, you know, everyone who's eligible and could use these funds to take a look at this. The entities have to be located in Vermont, obviously. The entities have to be able to identify economic harm due to the pandemic. And we will require disclosure of all past, pending, and planned pandemic relief. So we'll be working hand in hand with Cassie to make sure we're kind of coordinating with our applicants. You are not disqualified if you've received PPP, shuttered venues, some of our past cultural recovery or cultural relief grants. That doesn't necessarily disqualify you. We just need the full picture of the harm, the continuing economic losses, and then what relief you've already received, so we can make that judgment of economic harm. Next slide, award size and use of the funds. So again, right from the legislation, grants for monthly operating costs, including rent, mortgage, utilities, and insurance. So it's your regular bills. That's what this grant is for, and not for a restricted project, just for your regular costs of doing business. In terms of award sizes, for most businesses and nonprofits, the grant amounts will be based on 2019 pre-pandemic operating revenue. We have a tiered system. The awards will be approximately 10% of that 2019 operating revenue. Maximum grant size is $200,000. Sole proprietors, we're creating a separate simplified portal for sole proprietors, and those are flat grant amounts of $4,000. These grant funds are not eligible. We cannot, these funds cannot be used for capital expenditures of any sort. So this is regular operating expenses. The criteria for this grant program, the severity of pandemic harm as identified in the final rule from Treasury, financial insecurity, decreased revenue, increased costs, and or challenges meeting payroll and other operating costs. We're also taking into account community and cultural impact of your business or organization, mission, cultural significance, community served, and economic impact will also be a criteria in this grant program. So the entity's role in economic recovery, ability to retain or rehire jobs, a provider of unique products or services, and likelihood of post-pandemic resilience. So this is all kind of guidance we've taken from the Treasury's ruling on this sort of economic grants to support disproportionately impacted sectors. On the equity front, we've all learned a lot in terms of these various grant programs through the pandemic and who can access them and how we make them most inclusive. So a couple of things on this grant front. We will continue our special consideration for entities that are led by or directly serve BIPOC Vermonters or other historically marginalized communities. That is continuing from other COVID relief programs that we've run in the last 2 years that has worked well to level the playing field. We've also learned that multiple rounds allow for outreach and assistance to a wide range of applicants, again, because this grant program is serving an audience we don't typically serve, in the for-profit creative businesses. We know that time is important. There's folks out there who would never have considered coming in for a Vermont Arts Council grant. We want to make sure that they've got the time to pull the documentation they need and to get the help they need to apply. And multiple rounds will also allow for, that first round. It will account for those folks whose needs are a little more urgent to come in on the first round, and then we can spend the time on the second and third rounds to do the outreach needed so that this funding is distributed equitably. Our proposed timeline, we will open by September 15th, and that will be round one. And you'll see round 2 is slated to open January 3rd, and then round 3 is slated to open May 1st. Again, these are all subject to some adjustment based on the final approval from the state. So getting ready before the grant opens, there's a couple of things that you can do to prepare. One, and for each of these things, oh look, my colleague is plopping in the chat the link to each of these things. Thank you, Deirdre. So register in our grant portal. If you've never applied for a grant from the Vermont Arts Council, you just need to create an account in our grant portal. It's really quick and easy. Takes a business day or two to get your login all set up. So you can go ahead and you can do that today. Get that out of the way. We also, if you've had any dealings with federal funding of any sort in the last year, you know that they have switched their requirement from DUNS numbers to what they're calling unique entity identifiers. Again, this is a free process, and Deirdre has put a link on our website where we provide instructions on how to get that number from the federal government so that you're eligible to get, these are federal pass-through funds. And that should be a quick and easy process for most folks. You don't have to go through the entire SAM.gov registration. You just need to get that UEI number. And then the best way, I'm sure many of you are already on our email list. That's probably how you came to know about this morning's meeting. But that's the very best way to know the latest on this grant program and other grant programs opening. And Deirdre has put a link in the chat for that to sign up for the email list if you aren't already. And then share your input and questions. You know, my contact information is on the grants page, but we've also put together a Google form. If you've got input, ideas, questions, concerns about this process as we're finalizing it in the next month, we invite your input there. And one more time, I'll close with my disclaimer one more time. Subject, we're pending final approval from Agency of Administration. So some of the things I've shared with you today are subject to some change, but we will absolutely keep you all informed as the program is finalized. I want to briefly mention 2 other programs to watch out for that Representative Jerome and Senator Clarkson alluded to. That Community Recovery and Revitalization Grant Program being administered by the Vermont Department of Economic Development. They are, they are working on getting that program established. As Senator Clarkson mentioned, it's $40 million for transformative projects. And the best way, just like us, the best way to know the latest for that grant program is to sign up for their e-news if you're not already getting it. And so Deirdre has put a link for the Department of Economic Development newsletter sign up. And then the public library, this was not an S11, but this is really exciting. You know, public library is such a key part of our thriving creative sector. And in the capital bill, I guess, there was $16 million allotted for capital investment grants for our public libraries, kind of rooted at, these are also ARPA dollars rooted in this notion that public libraries are important community anchors, in particular, part of our plans for providing equitable broadband access for the state. And so those grants are going to open, we're told, probably in early 2023. And again, the best way, if any of you are representing public libraries or want to make sure your community public library knows about this, sign up for the Department of Libraries e-newsletter. And with that, I am going to stop sharing. And let's see, I'm just going to peek in the chat. Allison, your question about the rounds, deadlines, those are still in draft form, but this, you can access that. We'll have this slide deck and recording available after this session. And let's see, now I'm going to turn it over to Cassie Polimus, the CEO of the Vermont Economic Development Authority. Cassie, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate everything we've done to kind of collaborate and try to work together so that our our programs make sense to our applicants. So I'll turn it over to you, and you're welcome. I think you should be okay to share screen.
Great. Thank you very much, Amy. And thank you for inviting me here. It's really a wonderful opportunity to speak with the arts and culture sector and the creative economy. I spend my professional life working with small businesses, but I have immediate family members that earn their living in the fine arts sector. So it's definitely near and dear to my heart, and something that I'm equally passionate about. And so thank you, Allison and Stephanie, for championing this tremendous opportunity and money for a very important part of our economy, which, as we know, has a huge multiplier effect on the vitality of Vermont's economy. So way to go. Thank you very much. I do have a PowerPoint presentation I'm going to pull up here. A lot of the buzzwords and terms are going to be familiar to you. You've heard them earlier today. Let's see here. And I will ask also for a thumbs up when folks can see that.
We can see it, Cassie, but it would be great if you could make it like full screen. Yeah.
Is that better? Can you see the full screen? Are you seeing the presentation?
It's sort of got two things. It would be great to have your Vita slide be the one
so
before
it's sharing the wrong screen. Let me see if I can fix that here. Bear with me for a moment.
Cassie, I know we threw you for a loop when we switched from Teams to Zoom. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's no problem. No, don't worry about it. Should be able to do this. Still not sharing?
No, I think you need to click share screen again. And I'm also, Cassie, I would be happy, I'm pulling it up right now. I would be happy to display it for you if you prefer.
Okay, why don't we do that just for the
Got
sake
it, no problem.
Thank you. All right, thumbs up now. Everyone can see it? Great.
Yeah, we can see it.
Thank you. All right, so as I said, a lot of what I'm going to say is somewhat of an overlap with what Amy just presented, but there are some distinct differences in our programs. The good news for this sector is you've got multiple options and multiple sources of money. I guess the not so good news is you'll need to figure out which program works best for you and your particular circumstances. So there'll be, a fair amount of sort of analysis and work involved to figure out which one should you apply to, because you can't use multiple sources of money to pay for the same expenses. The feds don't really like that. So go ahead and move to the next one. So this is from S11, Act 183, and the VITA forgivable loan is described in section 47. My disclaimer here, similar to Amy's, is that before I can launch this program, I have to get sort of concurrence or final okay from the Joint Fiscal Committee. I'm in the process of working through that right now. The next committee meeting is July 28th. Assuming there are no material changes, what I'm telling you today should hold up fairly well through that process. And then I would hope to be able to launch the program shortly thereafter. Go ahead, Amy. So the overarching rules or guidelines that we have to abide by come from first the federal government, and with the ARPA being the bill here at the federal level. And so businesses that have suffered economic harm from the pandemic, and businesses that what we can do at this point is help businesses that are still continuing to experience financial insecurity, and therefore may not have the capacity to weather financial hardships. So this is important because we're not looking at adding to what's already been done in the past, say with PPP and the other grant programs. What we're looking at helping is the businesses that are still open today, but are not as on sound financial footing. They lost that cushion that they had going into the pandemic, having built that up. And so this money is to help them continue being in business. And we have $19 million to do that. Go ahead. So S11, the legislative intent of S11, again, to repeat, is the economic harm that threatens the current capacity of the business to weather financial hardships and result in ongoing financial security. So that language was taken out of the federal guidelines. And loans can be for eligible operating expenses. So similar to what Amy just described. So, but not restrictive the way that the PPP program was. If any of you did apply and receive money through PPP, there was a waiting on payroll. There's no restrictions or waitings. It's really very broad. Operating expenses, but not capital expenditure, same as the Arts Council program. And you can't use it to cover costs that were already covered with other COVID grants, or costs that you plan to cover with perhaps a grant that you're going to apply for in the future. So we'll need to get information on all that other sort of COVID subsidy money that you've either received or plan to receive. Go ahead. So eligible borrowers are for-profits and nonprofits, less than 500 employees. That's sort of the standard at the federal level for what's defined as a small business, located in Vermont. They were in operation as of March 31st, 2020, or had taken substantial steps towards becoming operational. So, if a business formed a legal entity prior to March 31st of 2020, but was still in the ramp up phase, hadn't really opened the doors. They were planning to open the doors. Those businesses are eligible as well. We found that there were a fair number of folks that were in that category that fell through the cracks with some of the other federal programs because of the strict rule of how the federal government defined being in operation as of the start of the pandemic. Business needs to identify economic harm, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And then priority sectors, arts and culture, of course, travel, lodging, tourism, agriculture, and childcare. Go ahead. So economic harm, this is where it starts to get a little tricky, and you're gonna, unless you are very comfortable with working with financial statements and are, thoroughly on top of your monthly P&L and so on, I would strongly encourage you to reach out to some technical assistance providers, and I'll get to that as well, to help you through this economic harm determination. Basically, I guess without getting into the number side, what we will do is quantify economic harm as the amount of decrease in your net adjusted operating income. So we're not using revenues, and we're not using taxable income or taxable loss. We're using a different number. So your net decline in that during the pandemic period, okay? And if that decline is 22.5% or greater than it was pre-pandemic, you're eligible to apply for this program. We've developed a calculator, if you will, that helps you plug in numbers from your tax return, and it will help you calculate whether you're eligible or not. The other thing I want to point out about this is that if we go back to what the intent included, ongoing financial security and capacity to weather financial hardships, it behooves us to look at how businesses are doing now in 2022. Some businesses could be doing just fine, going gangbusters. Other businesses could still be suffering because of the high cost of labor. They can't have their doors open as many days of the week as they want to. Supply chain issues, the list goes on. So that could still continue to have a negative impact. So we're going to take a look at that as well. So we will be asking for financial data in the current period. Well, current period, I'm saying through June of this year. Senator Clarkson alluded to VITA being able to use our sort of loan underwriting expertise and judgment to help businesses determine eligibility and loan amount. And one of the ways that we'll do that is we will scrutinize, everybody's tax returns or financial statements individually and look at any adjustments that we need to make. Those adjustments could either mean adding to the bottom line or subtracting to the bottom line. So for instance, one-time expenses that are non-recurring, we would say, well, that's not part of your normal operations. We'll take that out of consideration. Likewise for income, if a business, had to, let's say, sell some real estate assets that was a one-time thing in order to just raise some cash to make it through the pandemic, we're also going to take those sorts of things into consideration. So that's what's different than, say, a traditional grant program where they're, you're in the box or out of the box. We have that ability to look at it more individually. I know there'll be a lot of questions on this, but I'll just keep going for now. If you want to go to the next slide. Okay, so the loan amount, VITA will end up determining a loan amount, but we will base it on the lesser of the amount that adjusted net operating income for that period, 2.5 years decline, the cumulative or aggregate amount, or 6 months of eligible operating expenses pre-pandemic or other appropriate period. That's actually, I shouldn't have said or other appropriate pre-pandemic period. It should just say or other appropriate period. Because in other words, if expenses are a lot higher now because of those COVID drivers such as inflation, general inflation, supply chain, labor costs, we would take a look at that as well. But then there's an absolute maximum of $350,000. Next, please. Eligible use of loan proceeds, very much the same as what Amy just described. Operating expenses, which is a broad term. It's anything that runs through your income statement with the exception of cost of goods sold, but that's generally for this sector is not going to be applicable. So it's going to be most of your expenses. And it can include owner's salary as well, up to $100,000 or whatever the maximum was that an owner was paying him or herself before the pandemic. So, one of the things that we saw was that owners had to reduce their salaries, and it might have been just to be able to keep their employees on the payroll or just to kind of stay in business, if you will. And so that is an eligible expense up to a reasonable amount, and the $100,000 is the same number that the SBA used in the PPP program. Again, cannot use it for capital expenditures. There's another program for that. And then the forgiveness process, which is also on the next slide, should be very simple, providing, you can go ahead and advance the slide. Oh, I'm sorry, it's not on the next slide, but I'll continue on that. It's you provide documentation of how you use the proceeds. So how, if it went to salaries or what have you, or it could be that you provide your P&L for that period and we can see it that way. So the forgiveness process will be very simple. Go ahead now, thanks. So loan terms, these would have no interest, be unsecured, be up to 24 months that you would have, with the first 12 months being that we would, that's the term you have to use up those loan proceeds. And then at the end of 12 months, you would apply for forgiveness. You can apply anytime during that 12-month period. You could, apply within 1 month if you wanted to, and you've used up the loan proceeds. If, the what unexpected happens that you do not qualify for forgiveness, and we don't expect that to be the case for anybody, it would convert to a fully amortizing loan over the next 12 months with, again, no interest. If you're a for-profit entity, we will ask for personal guarantees, and we will search the state records to make sure that the businesses are in good standing with the state. And if you are a for-profit, we aren't going to require personal financial statements or anything to that nature. It's really an additional signal to us and the state that the owners are standing behind this, that this is really needed. We don't want to get a lot of applications from businesses that are just looking to see, well, will I get some money or will I not? Maybe, but I don't really need it. Sort of some of the experience that happened or is, can happen with programs like large grant programs. Next slide, please. Okay, and so this is the one about forgiveness, just submitting the documentation that the loan proceeds were used for those operating expenses. And then lastly, I do want to mention that you should talk to your tax advisor or somebody who helps you with your financials, that you may have some tax implications, because this would be considered debt that has been forgiven. Is there any? Okay, so as it stands now, I'm hoping that we can launch this sometime in early to mid-August. I'm looking at about a 4-month process where applications would be accepted. And unlike the arts and culture program, our decisioning will be on a rolling basis. We will decision applications as they come in. We will not have multiple rounds. We will just continue to accept and decision applications until the money runs out. And we've got $19 million, so it's a lot of money. It should go far. With that cap of $350,000, nobody can get more than that cap. So tentatively, end of the program would be end of November, and then forgiveness process would be ongoing. As far as priority sector goes, I did mention earlier and read out those priority sectors that are called out in S11. At this point, I'm not sure how that will be handled. I've been in conversations with ACCD. It's the Agency of Commerce and Community Development that would make that determination that they want to give priority to certain sectors. And which I'm fine with, but my desire would be to have the portal open first for those priority sectors. So if it's, arts and culture, let's say, and maybe travel and tourism, that we would accept only applications from those sectors during, I don't know, the first 6 to 8 weeks, let's say, if it's a 4-month application process. But that is to be determined. So stay tuned on how we're going to kind of work that out, and I'll have more on that. So, and then lastly, you know, our program is, I think there's one more slide. Oh, whoops. I'm not sure what happened to this side. Somebody's writing on it, but that's okay. Documents that are required to apply for the program. We'll have an application. We'll need your tax returns and then your interim financial information through the 6 months of this year. A list of all previous COVID money that you've received, our eligibility calculator, corporate organizational docs, because we will have to document this as a loan, bank information for funding, ID for either the owners or the executive directors of a nonprofit. It's pretty comprehensive, but we'll have a checklist. It'll be on our website along with the application and the calculator. Go ahead. All right, I think I've covered all of these things except for, okay, the technical assistance. We are working with several providers of technical assistance, the primary one being the Vermont Small Business Development Center. Working through them, they may dedicate one individual just strictly helping and providing technical assistance for this program. If not, all of their advisors will be accessible and aware of how to help anyone who comes through asking for help on, you know, the calculator or any other information. They're very good at that. If you are, you know, we lend to the agricultural community as well, so we're working with technical providers in that sector also. And we are in close partnership with SBA, so we can access their database to confirm any SBA COVID money, as well as any other state COVID money that's been received. So like Amy said, we are working closely with all our partners, and as well as, you know, on this program with the Arts Council to make sure that we are all coordinating where the money is going and helping folks find the best solution for them. So our website has a page that right now it just says check back later, but we'll keep that updated with information as it rolls out. So with that, I will turn it back to you, Amy, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Cassie. Folks, I know that we have just been through a ton of information and some of it rather detailed. And I am going to go through, there are a couple of questions. Tricia was asking about the technical assistance, and Cassie, I think you've covered that. The SBDC in particular will be available for that technical assistance. There was a question earlier, Cassie, is the calculator available yet online for folks to experiment with, or is that coming?
It's coming. We do have one. I'm just a little reluctant to share it out too broadly right now because we continue to tweak it. So as soon as it's been locked down, it will get on our website and it will be shared around broadly, because I know that is really the key tool that folks are interested in.
And I'm seeing also in the chat, this is a question I don't know, that we might have to dig in a little deeper on this, but maybe you know, Cassie, whether in terms of the operating, you know, monthly operating costs, the uses for these grant funds and your forgivable loan funds, can it be used for upgrades to internet or bandwidth capacity? Not sure if the upgrade itself would be considered a utility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as long as that's an expense that is run through the income statement, that's not capitalized on the balance sheet, that would be eligible.
Great, thank you. Let's see. We've got another question. Interested in hearing about the uses of funds for eligible borrowers, specifically childcare and agriculture applications.
Mhm. It's, the eligible uses is operating expenses regardless of the sector that the business is in. So, childcare, it can be used for payroll and buying supplies, and anything that's not a capital expenditure. It can't be used for putting up a wall to make a partition.
Ow!
Whoops. Similarly with agriculture, all operating.
Ow!
Maybe we're getting Zoom bombed here.
No, I think somebody needs to mute. Everybody needs to mute.
It's a hacker, Mambo, M-A-M-B-O. If the,
We'll take care of it. Thank you.
So happy to follow up with specifics if you are in one of those two sectors, childcare or ag, what your specific questions or concerns are as far as eligibility and eligible expenses. But generally, operating expenses very broadly, anything that is not capitalized or really a one-time non-recurring expense.
Great, and let's see. Are entities eligible for multiple programs if expenses are not duplicated? And I believe the answer is yes, provided that the grant loan funds are not being used for the same expenses. And if you can, make the case and provide the documentation of the economic harm and continuing economic loss, that is a possibility.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well.
Great. Let's see here. Can it be used for upgrading one's operational space? I think that would fall into a capital expenditure category, which would not be eligible. Is that right? Is that your understanding, Cassie?
Yep.
Okay. And let's see, we have a.
Looks like Robin has his hand up.
Oh, Robin, sure, jump on in.
Yeah, I had two questions and I was just typing that. I figured I could ask quicker this way. So the 6-month period prior pandemic, can you choose which 6 months? Because we were still a relatively new business at the time. So end of 2019 into the first 2 months of 2020, those last 6 months might be our ideal 6 months, or is it an average based on 2019 total? Is one. And second one is we also kind of maxed out our idle loans, and that's kind of our operating budget right now is based on that. Can you use any of the funds to pay back an idle loan? So it's a forgivable loan versus the 3.5%. And so those are my two questions. Thank you.
So I'll try and handle that. So the first one about the 6 months, I just need some clarification. I spoke about 6 months of this year, but you referenced 6 months of 2019.
Okay, I may have been confused in that part. Okay.
Okay. No problem. It's a good question because, I was going to follow that up. Like if you're a seasonal business, we need to kind of dive deep into that one. The second question, now I'm forgetting, what was it? Remind me.
It was weird because our current operating budget is based on our idle loan, which is like
right.
5%.
Yeah. So repaying debt isn't really considered an operating expense. So that I'd have to,
That's kind of what I figured, but I figured I'd ask.
Yeah.
And I'm recalling some specific ARPA restrictions on debt repayment is a no-no for ARPA funds in general.
Yeah.
let's see, some other questions. Oh, I know Linda Mirabili just had to jump off, but she had a question earlier around whether Creative Futures grants would be taxable. And yes, my understanding is check with your tax provider, but my understanding is that in most cases, grant income is income to be reported. And let's see, Susanna has a long and important question that gets to how, you know, artists or individual creatives, if they were operating and making income before the pandemic, but not necessarily incorporated as a sole proprietor, or you've come together to form an LLC in the wake of the pandemic. That's a big and important question, and I am sure that it impacts several folks on the call. And I hate to put it off, but I have to say that that's going to be a case-by-case determination, and we're going to need to go a little bit deeper into some of the specifics. There are allowances that Cassie was alluding to around taking into consideration special circumstances in the pre-pandemic year, and this might fall into that case. So I'm sorry, I don't have a more clear answer for you, but it's a definite maybe. How's that?
Yeah, and it's one that we're grappling with. You know, if you met that criteria of have taken substantial steps to be, you know, organized by that date, we do want to find a way to help you. It's a little more challenging, depending on, you know, what information is available. So for instance, you know, one of the first questions I would ask is, did you write a business plan before you open the door? Because that would provide us information on what your expectation was versus what reality ended up being. If you don't have a business plan, well, then we're going to be asking more questions and trying to figure out what information can we use to make some decisions on this.
And I think that gets to the heart of some of the intention behind this funding was we knew in the thick of the pandemic, these first waves of funding that were coming up, and there was a lot of kind of rigidity and formulas, and there were a lot of people that fell through the cracks. And we know that there's still folks, you know, part of the intention behind what Cassie is doing at VITA and what we're trying to do is making programs that will hopefully meet the needs of a broader range of folks and folks who might have fallen through the cracks earlier. Well, we have gone over time. There's been a lot of really good questions. I see one last question coming in. Application submission to disbursement. James, I will refer you to we'll have the slide deck up soon that will show our intended schedule on the rounds and the notifications of funding. So I'll refer you to that. You know, I know we've been through a lot of information. I know, you know, we don't have our programs completely open yet, but we really thought it would be useful to at least plant these seeds and make you all aware of these opportunities coming up so that you can best prepare. And with that, I'll say thank you to all of you for joining us on a lovely Friday morning in the summer. Cassie, Allison, Stephanie, thank you so much for taking time to present today. Any closing thoughts or remarks, and we'll send everybody off.
Yeah, I'll echo that. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Really glad to be here and hope that we can help a lot of you.
Thank you again so much for holding this. It's been an honor to work through this bill through the legislature, and I'm glad that the outcome was so positive. And I know it will benefit so many organizations. Take care.
Thank you all so much. Thank you all for the great work you do. Take care. More soon.